Usually when we talk about a military operation, there is this expectation of absolute precision.
Oh, for sure. Everything planned down to the minute.
Exactly. Like we picture the commanding officer standing around a brightly lit table, looking at a pristine map.
Right, drawing those clean lines of advance.
Yeah, they circle an objective and say, well, there it is. That's the target. We attack here, we defend there. It's almost clinical.
It creates a sense of comfort, honestly, doesn't it? We
Yeah.
really crave that binary simplicity.
We do.
Because when lives are on the line, we desperately want the battlefield to be a chessboard. Like a place where every piece operates according to visible, completely predictable rules.
But then you step into the world of early jet naval aviation. Specifically, you step off the edge of that map and right into the Korean War.
Yeah, and suddenly that pristine chessboard is just completely useless.
Totally useless. Because we are looking at a combat landscape dictated by howling, freezing winds and decks that pitch violently in the dark.
And that terrifying, unavoidable reality. The incredibly advanced machinery you are strapped into is just as likely to kill you as the enemy is.
It's wild. You are operating in the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Exactly. The adversary isn't just an army in a uniform. I mean, the adversary is the sea. It's the sky.
It's the bone-chilling cold.
Right. And perhaps most dangerously, the adversary is your own psychological breaking point.
So, welcome to the deep dive. We are exploring a breathtaking, honestly harrowing piece of source material today.
Yeah, we are looking at excerpts from James A. Michener's iconic novel, The Bridges at Toko-Ri.
And we are not just doing a flyover of military dates and coordinates here. We are going visceral. We are zeroing in on the men of Task Force 77.
Which is just a fascinating group to study.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly are we looking at beneath the surface of this text?
Well, we're looking at the ultimate clash between human fragility and this terrifyingly advanced, completely unforgiving machinery. Michener places us squarely at the intersection of several crushing pressures. There is the profound psychological toll of fighting a forgotten war.
An undeclared conflict where the home front has essentially just moved on.
Exactly. And at the very core of this narrative, we are examining the philosophy of what he calls the voluntary men.
The voluntary men.
Yeah. We're looking at those few individuals who physically carry the burden of a society that has, well, largely tuned them out.
So, for you listening, imagine you are standing on the icy pitching deck of the aircraft carrier Savo.
Just freezing.
Imagine being shoved into the suffocating, freezing cockpit of a Banshee jet. We really want to take you directly into the minds of the men who bear these unimaginable burdens.
And to do that, I mean, we have to start with the environment. Let's look at the SEA section of the text.
Because Michener doesn't treat the ocean as just a backdrop, does he?
Not at all. The environment is an active, deeply hostile antagonist.
The geography itself sets the tone for the entire psychological experience.
Yeah.
I mean, we're off the coast of Korea, and Michener describes these howling Siberian winds.
And this isn't just a brisk breeze,
No, this is Arctic air. It is roaring down from Russia, lashing the jagged mountains of Korea. It's literally freezing infantry soldiers in the trenches into stiff, awkward forms.
It's horrific. And then that same brutal wind sweeps out over the ocean, hitting the task force.
Right, and it is so cold, it freezes the salt spray right out of the air before it even hits the deck.
I can't even fathom that level of cold.
And plowing through this violently turbulent sea, not far from those frozen trenches, is Task Force 77.
The scale of this operation is just staggering.
It really is. We're talking about a battleship, 2 cruisers, 14 destroyers. They're throwing up a massive defensive screen against Russian submarines.
Right.
And at the center of this steel armada, the mighty arms of the force are 2 fast aircraft carriers. And here's a detail from the text that completely stopped me in my tracks.
The names of the carriers.
Yes, the names. They are the Hornet and the Savo.
What's fascinating here is the sheer irony of those names. Michener spends a good amount of time pointing out that this is a strange, almost uniquely American brand of defiance.
How so? Like, usually you'd want a tough-sounding name, right?
Well, yeah. When you think of naming a multi-billion-dollar flagship, you usually choose a name that projects invincibility, or you memorialize a flawless, stirring victory.
Like the Enterprise or the Intrepid.
Exactly. But these ships memorialize humiliating, devastating defeats.
Right, because the original Hornet went down off Guadalcanal in 1942. It absorbed just a terrifying amount of Japanese bombs and torpedoes.
Yeah, it was a huge loss.
And the Savo, I mean, that name points directly to the Battle of Savo Island, which is arguably the United States Navy's most shameful defeat in its history.
Absolutely. 4 cruisers were caught completely sleeping and sank helpless in the dark.
So why name your best ships after your worst days?
By christening their most powerful modern weapons with the names of their darkest hours, the Navy is publishing its willingness to surmount catastrophe.
Oh, wow.
It's a psychological statement broadcast to the enemy, and a reminder to the men on board, basically saying, we have been broken here before.
Like we have tasted absolute disaster.
Exactly, and yet here we are again, stronger and more lethal.
And they really need every ounce of that psychological armor. Because what is happening on the deck of the Savo is pure, meticulously choreographed chaos.
Chaos is the right word.
I was trying to visualize the mechanics of landing one of these early jets on a carrier deck. And it's not like landing a modern commercial airliner on a 2-mile concrete runway.
Not even close.
Landing a 9-ton jet at 135 miles an hour on a pitching deck in the freezing dusk. I mean, it's like trying to catch a speeding bullet with a giant rubber band while standing on a seesaw in the dark.
That captures the sheer physical impossibility of the Taz perfectly. Michener really geeks out on the exact physics of this operation.
She does.
And we have to understand the mechanics to truly grasp the terror these pilots face. I mean, consider the kinetic energy.
Right.
When a jet like the Banshee approaches the deck, it weighs over 7 tons. And it's moving at over 135 miles an hour.
That's massive.
The pilot has exactly 120 feet to bring that huge, screaming piece of metal to a dead stop.
I just don't get how the plane doesn't just rip the deck apart or, fly straight off the other end.
Well, it requires a really delicate manipulation of relative speed and brute hydraulic force.
Okay, walk me through it.
First, the carrier itself has to turn directly into the wind. So let's say there's a 40-mile-an-hour wind blowing.
Which there usually was.
Right. If the plane is flying at 135 miles an hour, flying into that 40-mile-an-hour headwind instantly cuts the plane's relative speed over the deck down to 95 miles an hour.
Ah, because the wind is physically pushing back against the wings.
Precisely. Then the aircraft carrier itself is steaming away from the incoming plane at about 11 miles an hour.
Okay, so you subtract that.
Yep. Dropping the relative speed to 84 miles an hour. That 84 miles an hour is what the arresting gear actually has to absorb.
So the pilot drops a tail hook.
Yes, and that hook has to catch one of several heavy steel wires stretched across the deck.
And those wires aren't just tied to the deck, right? Like, they have give.
Exactly. They're attached to massive hydraulic engines below decks that spool out and absorb the kinetic energy, basically dragging the plane to a halt.
But what if the pilot misses the wires? Like, what if the hook bounces?
That is the nightmare scenario. It's known as a bolter.
A dilter, okay.
But on these early straight deck carriers, you couldn't just hit the gas and fly away easily if you miss.
Right, because the runway doesn't angle off the side like modern ones.
Exactly. If the hook misses the steel wires, the plane slams into 2 slim nylon barriers meant to drag the landing gear down and chop its momentum.
And if a runaway jet is coming in too fast and it snaps the wires and tears through those barriers.
Then it plunges into the barricade. This is a stout nylon web that literally entwines itself around the wings and wheels.
Oh, man.
It's designed to violently flip and tear the jet apart like a trapped insect.
Seriously.
Yeah.
They just destroy the plane.
Yeah. The entire purpose of destroying the incoming jet is just to stop it from plowing into the dozens of parked, fully fueled planes and armed men sitting at the forward end of the ship.
So the margin of error is practically zero.
Zero.
And once the plane is down, the chaos doesn't stop. I mean, they don't have automated tracks gently moving these jets around.
Not at all. It's all muscle.
You have hundreds of young men in these very-colored uniforms running around a deck that is coated in freezing sea spray.
Yeah, it's a very specific color-coded system.
Right. You have men in green stowing the heavy catapult gear, men in yellow directing traffic through a maze of spinning turbine blades.
And those blades are practically invisible in the dark.
Exactly. And you have tough guys in blue shirts physically leaning their shoulders against 9 tons of jet aircraft.
Just slipping and sliding on an icy wooden deck to push the planes into position.
While men in blazing red shirts are fueling the craft with highly combustible jet fuel.
And looming behind all of this human exertion is a massive, sinister black crane they call Tilly.
Tilly the crane.
Yeah. Tilly's sole purpose is to wait for a crash, roll over, and unceremoniously toss a burning multi-million-dollar plane right into the freezing sea to save the ship.
That's brutal. Just push it over the side.
Exactly. And standing next to Tilly are men in ashen gray, full-body asbestos suits.
Just waiting.
Just waiting for the moment they have to walk straight into a wall of burning jet fuel to drag a screaming pilot out of a cockpit.
We really think of the jet age as this era of supersonic, sterile technology.
Yep.
But on the deck of the Savo, it is bare hands, frozen knuckles, and brutal, terrifying human labor.
It's incredibly primitive when you strip it down.
And the man orchestrating the final terrifying moment of that flight, the landing, is a guy they call Beer Barrel.
Beer Barrel. He is arguably one of the most compelling characters in the entire text.
I completely agree.
He serves as the landing signal officer, or LSO.
And the physical description of him is incredible. He's a giant, 6'3", over 250 pounds.
Massive guy.
He's a farmer from Texas who hadn't even seen the ocean before 1943, and he stands at the very edge of the ship on a tiny platform.
Wearing a heavy suit stitched with fluorescent cloth so his arms and legs are visible in the gloom.
Right. He holds two glowing paddles to guide the planes in.
Yeah.
But the guy is a complete eccentric. I mean, he literally smuggles beer aboard the ship in outsized, dummy golf bags.
Which is just hilarious. The smuggling is an open secret, too.
Everyone knows.
Oh, yeah. The carrier captains know about it. Even the incredibly strict task force commander, Admiral Tarrant, willfully looks the other way.
Which is so unusual for the military. The military is built on discipline and regulations.
Right. But they allow this blatant violation for one simple reason. Beer Barrel can do one thing better than any other human being alive.
He can land jets.
He can land jets under impossible conditions.
He claims that having a can of cold beer in his belly forms a kind of gyroscope.
A gyroscope. I love that detail.
He says it harmonizes with the elements, making him one with the sea, the sky, the heaving deck, and the heart of the incoming pilot.
We really have to analyze Beer Barrel's psychological role here because he is far more than a traffic cop with paddles.
Absolutely.
He provides immense emotional safety to these tightly wound pilots. When he stands on that platform, he is entirely projecting his consciousness into the cockpit of every incoming plane.
He senses what a tired, freezing, jittery pilot is going to do before the pilot even realizes he's making a mistake.
Exactly. As he brings a plane in, he's muttering to himself, come on, Junior, keep your nose up so your hook will catch. Good boy.
And when they catch that perfect wire, the number 3 wire,
right,
Beer Barrel is in absolute bliss.
Oh, he loves it.
He tells the men, heaven is where everybody gets number 3 wire. Hell is where they fly wrong and catch number 13 and crash into the barrier and burn.
He becomes the ultimate psychological anchor in a world devoid of stability.
The pilots don't even look at the pitching deck, do they?
No, looking at the deck will kill you because it's moving. They look at him.
Right.
He tells them, don't fly the deck, Junior. Don't fly the sea, fly me.
Wow.
He is performing a miracle of spatial judgment and empathy every 26 seconds.
And there's this moment where an Air Force colonel visiting the ship watches this terrifying ballet. And he remarks that it isn't a landing at all. It's a controlled crash.
And Beer Barrel's response is so profound.
He simply replies, difference is that when I crash them, they're safe in the arms of God.
Safe in the arms of God. It's beautiful.
I love that. But the reality is, sometimes they don't make it to the deck.
Unfortunately, no.
Sometimes the plane is too damaged, or they run out of fuel, and they have to ditch in that freezing, violent sea.
Which is basically a death sentence.
Exactly. And that brings us to the Guardians of the Water, the helicopter rescue team. Mike Forney and Nestor Gamage.
The contrast Michener creates between these two men is brilliant.
It really is.
On one hand, you have Mike Forney, this tough, loud, 27-year-old Irishman from Chicago.
He's arrogant. He's cocky. He essentially bullies his way into flight school.
And he flies his rescue helicopter wearing a green opera hat.
A bright green top hat. And a Kelly green Baron von Richthofen scarf. And he keeps a clay pipe jammed in his teeth.
It's quite the image.
Now, wait a minute. I have to push back on this. The United States Navy is obsessed with uniformity. It's literally in the word uniform.
Right, of course.
How on earth does a junior officer get away with wearing a bright green leprechaun hat in a combat zone? Doesn't that violate every single regulation in the book?
Oh, under any normal circumstances, yes. He would be court-martialed or at least severely reprimanded and grounded immediately.
So why let him do it?
Because the command structure tolerates it when you look at the psychology of the Green Hat and the brutal reality of the environment.
Okay, lay it out for me.
When a pilot ditches in the freezing ocean off the coast of Korea in winter, the clock starts ticking instantly. They have exactly 20 minutes to live.
20.
Yes. The physiological breakdown is terrifyingly rapid. After 5 minutes in that water, your hands and face freeze solid.
You lose tactile sensation completely.
Exactly. At 12 minutes, the blood has retreated so far to your core that your arms and legs completely stop functioning. You cannot swim, you cannot grasp a rope.
And at 20 minutes?
At 20 minutes, your heart stops. You are dead.
20 minutes. That's the length of a coffee break.
Imagine the absolute sheer terror of floating in those massive swells, feeling your body rapidly shutting down, knowing with absolute certainty that you are minutes away from freezing to death.
The panic would be blinding. You'd be flailing.
Completely blinding. Then you hear the chop, chop, chop of rotor blades. You look up through the freezing spray, and leaning out of a helicopter is a guy in a bright green top hat smoking a pipe.
It is completely absurd.
And that absurdity is exactly the point. The sheer visual shock of it instantly shatters the pilot's panic.
It snaps him out of it.
Yes. Forney himself explains his logic. He says, when I appear anywhere, I want the regular pilots to know it, because if they listen to me, I'll save them.
So that hat signifies unshakable hope.
Exactly. It tells the dying, panicking pilot that the cavalry isn't just here. The cavalry is so completely in control of this deadly situation that they are wearing a party hat.
That's brilliant. It forces the pilot to focus, to snap out of shock, and to follow instructions.
And Forney's partner in the chopper is Nestor Gamage.
Poor Nestor.
Yeah, Michener describes him as a sad-faced, undersized guy from Kentucky. He's not particularly smart, but he is incredibly strong.
And crucially, he absolutely despises the sea.
Hates it.
But he is the guy who actually has to go down into the water.
We see the terrifying mechanics of this play out during a harrowing rescue early in the text.
Right, with Harry Brubaker.
Yes, a pilot named Harry Brubaker has to ditch his Banshee jet after a mission. He hits the water, the plane sinks, and he is instantly engulfed in the freezing cold.
And Forney flies the chopper out there, hovering dangerously low over these massive swells. They lower the rescue sling.
But Brubaker has been in the water too long. He is too frozen.
Right, Brubaker is screaming that his hands simply won't work. He literally can't slip the sling over his own head.
So Nestor, this guy who hates and fears the ocean more than anything, voluntarily unhooks his own safety harness and drops directly into the icy waves.
Which is insanely brave. He fights with the freezing pilot. He tries 4 separate times to maneuver the heavy, wet sling over Brubaker's gear, getting battered by the waves.
He fails every time. And finally, operating on pure adrenaline, Nestor has to jam his boot into Brubaker's back and violently shove the frozen man into the sling.
And the brutal reality of the helicopter's weight limit means they can only hoist 1 man at a time.
Right. So once Brubaker's hoisted up and flown toward a nearby destroyer, Nestor Gamage is left entirely alone in the freezing ocean.
Just bobbing in the swells, waiting for a second helicopter to arrive.
And he feels the same deadly cold creeping in, numbing his own powerful hands, starting his own 20-minute clock.
It is a moment of silent, miserable bravery. He risks his life without a second of hesitation for a man he doesn't even know.
It really makes you think.
It does. This incredible, violent physical rescue from the freezing sea naturally forces us to ask a deeper question. Who is being rescued?
And why are they out there in the first place?
Exactly. Because the man they pull out of the water, Harry Brubaker, is one of those fascinating military protagonists I've ever encountered.
Brubaker is the emotional core of this deep dive. If we want to understand the soul of Task Force 77, we really have to understand him.
So who is he?
Well, Harry Brubaker is not a career military man. He isn't a warrior born for the sea.
No.
He is a 29-year-old civilian lawyer from Denver, Colorado.
He has a wife, Nancy, and 2 young daughters. And he is a World War II veteran.
Right. He flew fighter planes in the Pacific against the Japanese, survived, went home, built a law practice, started a family.
And then he was involuntarily called back to service for the Korean War.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Brubaker is not a gung-ho patriot.
Not at all.
He is not out there looking to earn medals or glory. He is deeply, profoundly bitter.
He resents the Navy. He resents the politicians. He hates that he had to abandon his life, his family, and his law practice, while the rest of America is just going about its business.
There's a moment where he says, "In Denver, nobody even knew there was a war except my wife. Nobody supports this war."
To understand Brubaker's resentment, we really have to look closely at the geopolitical reality of the Korean War, don't we?
We do. It was an undeclared, incredibly frustrating conflict. It was referred to politically as a police action.
A police action. That sounds so clinical.
It didn't have the moral clarity, the existential threat, or the total national mobilization of World War II.
Right, because during WWII, everyone was rationing, everyone was buying war bonds, everyone was involved.
But in 1952, the American home front was booming economically. People were buying televisions and moving to the suburbs.
They were largely ignoring the men freezing in Korea.
Exactly. And the draft logistics were infuriating. Brubaker points out the profound unfairness of it.
He tells his commander, "I was unattached. The organized reserve units were drawing pay, going to meetings, but when the war started, they were left home. I was called."
He was essentially punished for simply being a competent pilot in the past.
He admits, "Sometimes I'm so bitter I could bitch up the works on purpose."
But he doesn't bitch up the works. That is the central paradox of his character.
He hates being there. He believes the war is pointless.
But when he straps into that Banshee and the catapult fires, shooting 9 tons of metal off the deck at 135 miles an hour, he executes the mission flawlessly.
He flies low, he faces the anti-aircraft fire, and he hits the target.
And the man who watches Brubaker do this, the man who commands this entire task force and holds all their lives in his hands, is Admiral George Tarrant.
George the Tyrant, as his men call him.
Yeah, George the Tyrant.
Tarrant is a tall, narrow, physically frail, but psychologically iron-willed man from Maine.
He is a master of naval strategy, but he is living an incredibly isolated, almost monastic existence on the ship.
Right. He spends his days and nights in Flag Plot. That's his darkened, restricted command room, illuminated only by the glow of radar screens.
And his backstory is absolutely heartbreaking. Tarrant is a man who has already paid the ultimate price for his country.
He gave 2 sons to World War II.
Yes. One was killed on the first day of the war at Pearl Harbor. The other was killed at the Battle of Midway, shot down trying to torpedo a Japanese carrier.
And the grief of losing both boys caused Tarrant's wife to suffer a complete mental collapse.
She just faded away into her own mind, leaving Tarrant entirely alone in the world.
Because Tarrant has sacrificed everything, he possesses an unshakable moral authority. But he also carries a bottomless well of grief.
To cope with this, he has developed a psychological mechanism.
Which is?
On his combat cruises, he subconsciously searches for and adopts young pilots who match the age, rank, and temperament his sons would have been if they had lived.
And Harry Brubaker becomes that surrogate son.
He does. Brubaker has the quick temper of Tarrant's sons, the abiding resentments, the undeniable courage.
So after Brubaker is rescued from the sea, Tarrant calls him into Flag Plot. And the two of them have this incredible, raw, philosophical debate about the nature of the war.
It's really the central debate of Michener's text. Brubaker challenges the admiral.
He asks why the United States doesn't just pull out of Korea entirely.
Right. Militarily, it feels like a tragedy. They are tied down to a few square miles of ocean, flying incredibly expensive jet bombers on dangerous, close air support missions for tiny gains on the ground.
It feels completely futile.
And Tarrant doesn't offer him political platitudes. He just puts his coffee cup down and says, "That's rubbish, son, and you know it."
He says all through history, free men have had to fight the wrong war in the wrong place. But that's the one they're stuck with.
This is where Tarrant introduces the philosophy of the voluntary men. Now, we have to unpack this term carefully.
Yeah, because as we discussed, Brubaker was drafted. He was forced back into uniform. He did not volunteer for this specific war.
Exactly. He was yanked out of his civilian life kicking and screaming.
But Tarrant is talking about the action the man takes once he is thrust into the crucible.
Right. When Brubaker is in the air, diving at 500 miles an hour through a wall of communist anti-aircraft fire, the decision to hold the stick steady is entirely his.
He doesn't veer away from the target. He easily could.
In the chaos of combat, no one would really know if he dropped his bombs a fraction of a second early to pull out of the dive and save his own life.
But he doesn't. He hammers on in.
Tarrant explains later to Brubaker's wife, Nancy, that all of human civilization rests entirely on the shoulders of these few voluntary men.
They are the ones who willingly take on the crushing burden of survival, while the rest of society obliviously goes on with their lives.
It's an immense, crushing weight to carry.
So you have these men wound tight as piano wire operating on a razor's edge of survival for weeks on end at sea, carrying both physical terror and heavy philosophical burdens.
Eventually, that tension has to be released.
It does. And that release valve brings us to the shore.
The task force pulls into the port of Yokosuka, Japan. It is described by the sailors as the greatest liberty port in the world.
Better than Marseille, cheaper than New York.
It's this vibrant, chaotic, neon-lit world that stands in stark contrast to the sterile steel of the ship and the frozen wasteland of Korea.
But even the simple act of trying to dock the ship causes massive drama.
Oh, yeah. There is a sharp wind blowing off the sea, and the carrier Savo is so gargantuan that the tiny harbor tugboats simply cannot keep her from crashing into the concrete quay.
The ship's captain is faced with a crisis. If the carrier smashes into the dock, it will cause millions of dollars in damage and potentially put the ship out of action.
So he orders a maneuver called a windmill.
A windmill. Okay, how does that work?
They lash down 16 propeller-driven planes, F-4U Corsairs and 80 Sky Raiders, to the flight deck. They point the noses of the planes into the wind and order the pilots to run the massive engines at full roaring speed. Yeah. The combined thrust from those 16 propellers acts like a giant fan to physically push the entire aircraft carrier away from the dock.
Which is an absolutely insane piece of improvisation. When I was reading this, it struck me, it's like redlining the engine of a vintage Ferrari in your driveway just to use the exhaust to blow leaves off your lawn.
That is exactly how the CAG feels.
The CAG.
The CAG is the commander of the air group. He is the man directly responsible for the pilots and the planes. He's a stocky, 40-year-old fireball of a man with a cigar perpetually jutting out of his teeth. And when he sees the windmill maneuver, he is furious.
Why is it so damaging to the planes, though?
Because these are air-cooled radial engines. They are designed to be cooled by the massive rush of freezing air when the plane is flying at 300 miles an hour.
Oh, I see.
Running them at full throttle while heavily tied down to a stationary deck with only a mild harbor breeze to cool them is literally melting the engines from the inside out. The CAG stands there watching thick black smoke pouring out of his valuable planes, and he is doing a terrifying mental calculus.
He knows that next week, a pilot is going to be flying deep over the mountains of North Korea, and that thermally abused engine is going to seize up and fail.
And that pilot is going to die.
So the CAG storms up to Admiral Tarrant in flag plot to demand that the carrier captains stop doing this. He's protecting his men.
But Tarrant uses this furious confrontation as a profound leadership test.
How so?
Well, the Navy High Command in Washington is considering the CAG for a major promotion to task force commander. That's a job that requires managing massive fleets, not just squadrons of planes.
Right, much bigger picture.
Tarrant listens to the CAG's rant and then asks him point blank, do you consider an F-4U engine more valuable than a carrier?
Oof. Checkmate.
The CAG just stammers and backs down.
And Tarrant realizes in that moment that the CAG, despite being a brilliant pilot and deeply loved by his men, is a hothead who lacks the ultimate cold perspective required for fleet command.
He can't see the forest for the trees. To save a $40 million capital ship from smashing its hull against a concrete dock, yes, you sacrifice a few airplane engines.
You might even indirectly sacrifice the pilots who fly them later.
Yeah.
It is a brutal, inhuman calculus, but that is the reality of high command.
Meanwhile, the enlisted men are hitting the shore, eager to spend their pay, and we get the absolute absurdity and tragedy of Mike Forney's shore leave.
Mike Forney, our brash helicopter hero with the green hat, he has a Japanese girlfriend in Yokosuka named Kimiko.
He's deeply in love with her. He even bought her an incredibly expensive princess-style evening dress from New York.
Shows up at the base gate, expecting a romantic reunion, and she simply tells him, I'm very sorry, but while Mike at sea, I lose my heart to Essex man. Essex not at sea.
Her logic is flawless, honestly.
It is. Why wait for a guy who might die at sea when you can date a sailor from the carrier Essex who's currently safe in port?
But Forney does not take this well. This romantic betrayal leads to a massive legendary riot at a place called the Pirate's Den in Tokyo.
The setting Michener creates for this brawl is surreal.
The Pirate's Den is a massive dance hall built by a Japanese war profiteer. It's constructed out of exposed steel girders to resemble the interior of a Chinese junk.
It has a bizarre open-air elevator that constantly moves an 11-piece jazz band up and down 5 floors while they play.
And a mock airplane suspended from the ceiling piloted by a scantily clad girl who delivers cold beer to the tables.
It's pure sensory overload. And into this chaos walks Mike Forney, who spots Kimiko in the dress he bought her, dancing with the ape from the Essex.
Forney tries to literally rip the expensive dress off her body, claiming it's his property.
The Essex men jump in to defend her. Mr. Gamage, Forney's loyal, quiet partner, starts swinging his massive fists.
And soon the two of them are fighting half the United States Navy and the Tokyo Military Police.
They inevitably get thrown in a military jail. And this is where the story shifts back to Harry Brubaker.
Brubaker is on his precious, incredibly rare shore leave. His wife, Nancy, and his two little girls have traveled all the way from Colorado to Japan just to see him for a few fleeting days.
And yet, in the middle of the night, Brubaker receives a phone call, leaves his family in their hotel room, and travels 60 miles to Tokyo to bail Forney out.
He pays the $80 for the damages, which was a lot of money in 1952.
Yeah, that's a huge chunk of change.
And the military police major processing the release is totally baffled. He looks at Brubaker, this clean-cut, educated officer, and asks why he cares about these two violent monsters.
And Brubaker simply says, "The other night I ditched my plane at sea. These two men saved my life."
This exchange perfectly illustrates the unbreakable, unspoken bond of the sea.
Shore leave rules, the rigid hierarchy of officers and enlisted men, normal social conventions, none of that applies to the dead of a life saved.
Forney pulled Brubaker out of the freezing ocean when his 20-minute clock was almost up. Therefore, Brubaker will gladly give up his precious hours with his family to pull Forney out of a Tokyo jail cell.
But Brubaker does eventually get back to his family at the Fujisan Hotel in the mountains, and Michener gives us this incredibly poignant, quiet scene.
Brubaker, Nancy, and their two little girls are soaking in a private, bubbling sulfur bath at the hotel.
It's a rare moment of pure, enveloping warmth and peace after the icy terror of the carrier deck.
But then, the locked door of their private bath rattles and opens. A Japanese man enters.
He bows politely, strips down, and cheerfully invites his wife and two teenage daughters into the room.
At first, Brubaker, carrying his American sensibilities, is shocked. He tries to protest, trying to protect his family's modesty.
But the Japanese man just smiles broadly, points to the hot water, says, "Number one, good morning," and climbs in.
And within minutes, the cultural barrier drops and the two families end up sharing the pool in total harmony.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Michener is doing something profound with this scene.
Think about Harry Brubaker's history. Just a few years prior, in 1944, he was a Navy fighter pilot in the Pacific.
He spent years of his youth actively hating the Japanese.
He bombed their ships, he strafed their troops, he was trained to view them as a monstrous enemy.
And now in 1952, he is sitting naked and vulnerable in a hot spring, watching his little American daughters splashing and playing happily with the daughters of a man he might have actively tried to kill a few years ago.
The ingrained hatred completely dissolves in the warm water.
It beautifully highlights the absurdity and the shifting, temporary nature of enemies in war.
It reinforces Admiral Tarrant's earlier point about the enduring tragedy of human conflict. Today, you bomb them relentlessly. Tomorrow, you share a peaceful bath with them.
And today, you're flying off to bomb someone else in Korea who you might be sharing a bath with in 10 years. The geopolitical lines move, but the human cost remains.
But the peace of that hot spring is fleeting. The Liberty period ends with yet another massive, chaotic brawl between the Savo men and the Essex men over Kimiko.
This final fight results in Mike Forney and Mr. Gamage being banished from the pristine carrier.
They are transferred to a miserable, freezing scow stationed near the Korean coast to do rescue duty from there.
And with the shore leave over, the source material pulls us relentlessly back to the war and up into the sky for the ultimate mission.
We are looking at the anatomy of a strike. But before they even leave the deck, we have to understand the suffocating, exhausting preparation required just to sit in the cockpit of a jet.
The ready room on the carrier, where the pilots get briefed, is kept freezing cold on purpose.
Why?
Because if it were warm, the pilots would pass out from heat exhaustion just putting on their gear. Brubaker starts by putting on long-handled woolen underwear.
Then he steps into a skin-tight G-suit.
Let's explain the G-suit because it's a vital piece of survival technology.
Right. When a pilot pulls out of a steep dive at 500 miles an hour, the centrifugal force, the G-force, pulls the blood out of their brain and down into their legs,
which causes them to black out and crash.
The G-suit is wired to the plane systems. When the plane pulls Gs, the suit automatically inflates bladders around the pilot's calves, thighs, and abdomen,
acting like a giant tourniquet to physically squeeze the blood back up into the pilot's head.
Incredible technology. So he has the wool underwear, the G-suit, and then he puts on inch-thick quilted underwear over that. 3 pairs of bulky socks.
And then he has to put on the dreaded poopy suit.
Oh, the Mark III exposure suit. It is universally despised by every pilot who has ever worn one.
It's a massive, watertight rubber suit, but it has no zippers, because zippers aren't watertight.
So to get into it, Brubaker has to contort his body and climb in through a tight rubber hole running from his left shoulder down to his right hip.
Once he's inside, he has to physically roll the rubber flaps together and clamp them tight to make a seal.
The suit makes the pilots look like fat green watermelons. It smells of vulcanized rubber and old sweat.
And it doesn't breathe at all, so they immediately start sweating profusely, trapping the moisture against their skin in the freezing air.
It is incredibly claustrophobic and uncomfortable.
And he's not done. Over the rubber suit, he still has to add a heavy survival vest packed with gear.
A .38 caliber pistol, a Mae West inflatable life preserver around his neck, a heavy hip knife, 3 pairs of gloves, a heavy golden crash helmet.
And then he has to plug into oxygen connections and heavy canvas harness straps.
Michener says they waddle out to the plains like muscle-bound pigs.
But there is a deep psychological weight to this gear that mirrors the theme of the text. Michener writes that they're weighed down like some primeval monster.
The suffocating physical layers mirror the suffocating psychological burden of the mission. They are trapped inside this claustrophobic rubber and steel, just as they are trapped inside this frustrating, endless war.
But then the catapult fires, slamming them back into their seats, and they soar up into the absolute pristine freedom of the sky.
The mission starts with a reconnaissance flight. Brubaker is flying cover for the CAG, who is taking low-level photographs of the target.
And the view from 30,000 feet is majestic. Michener describes Brubaker looking out to the east and seeing Fujiyama in Japan.
Perfectly cone-shaped, dazzling white, serene, and beautiful.
And then he shifts his gaze slightly to the west, and he sees the mountains of Korea.
The geographical contrast is stark and symbolic. The mountains of Korea are described as bold, blunt, and ugly.
They are tortured and convoluted, running in crazy, unpredictable directions with no discernible pattern.
They are the physical manifestation of pain and chaos, hiding the deadly objective, the bridges of Toko-Ri.
To get to these bridges, the jets have to fly into a geographical nightmare. It's a deep river valley that has only one way in and one way out.
And the surrounding hills are heavily pockmarked with over 60 radar-guided anti-aircraft gun emplacements.
The communists have them perfectly lined up. To hit the bridges, the pilots have to fly straight down a tunnel of concentrated fire.
But before the main strike on the bridges, there is a diversionary mission. The jets are called in by ground controllers to support a platoon of South Korean infantry that is pinned down by communist troops.
And this introduces one of the most jarring, fascinating, technological contrasts in the entire text. To find the hidden communist troops, they have to communicate with an airborne spotter calling himself Roundelay.
Yeah, Brubaker tunes his radio and hears this whispery, casual voice. He looks down and sees Roundelay's plane. It's an SNJ.
For context, an SNJ is a rickety, desperately out-of-date, two-bladed propeller trainer plane with a glass greenhouse canopy.
Brubaker actually remembers building a balsa wood model of this exact plane as a kid back in 1935.
And here it is, hopping around the treetops in 1952, spotting targets for 500-mile-an-hour jet fighters.
The pilot of Roundelay is the slap-happy, incredibly brave Air Force captain who flies almost at ground level, lazily circling over the enemy.
When he spots hidden communist guns, he dives down and fires small white smoke rockets into their positions,
marking the target so the lightning-fast Navy jets high above can dive down and obliterate them with heavy bombs.
And during this strike, we see a brutal psychological trick the communist troops use. Roundelay spots a column of enemy troops marching down a dirt road. He marks them.
Brubaker's jets scream in for a strafing run. But the troops don't scatter. They don't run for the ditches.
Instead, they stop, kneel in the middle of the road, and clasp their hands over their heads.
It's a calculated, chilling action designed to freeze the American pilots. The enemy knows that these American pilots were raised in a society with ingrained moral restraints.
They were taught not to shoot an unarmed man who is surrendering. Brubaker's boyhood training kicks in. He sees them kneeling in his gun sights, and his finger hesitates on the trigger.
It feels like cold-blooded murder.
He radios Roundelay, asking for confirmation, but Roundelay unemotionally tells him to clobber those guys because it's a standard psychological trick.
They aren't surrendering. They're just trying to throw the pilots off balance so they survive the pass.
So Brubaker fires. He unleashes a wall of 20-millimeter cannon fire, spraying the kneeling troops.
It's a moment of detached, mechanized killing. He destroys human beings from a distance, feeling nothing but the vibration of the guns.
But his illusion of sterile control is completely shattered just seconds later.
The brave, bustling little SNJ spotter plane, Roundelay, is suddenly hit by a random 5-inch communist anti-aircraft shell.
It doesn't just crash, it is blown completely to ribbons in midair. 1 second it's there, the next it's a cloud of falling debris.
And Brubaker, who has spent this entire deep dive as a reluctant, bitter civilian lawyer who hates the Navy, he goes absolutely wild with a primal rage.
He flips his Banshee over, dives almost directly into the muzzle of the enemy gun that killed Roundelay, and fires continuously until his own guns are completely empty.
He obliterates the gun emplacement and the men operating it. It strips away his civilian veneer and shows the lethal, furious reality hiding beneath.
So what does this all mean? It proves that the sky is not a sterile place of pure, poetic flight. It is a theater of sudden, horrific, and often random violence.
And this entire diversion leads directly to the main event, bombing the bridges of Toko-Ri.
The CAG leads the strike into the valley. The choreography is intense. First, the flak suppression planes go in.
Their entire job is to fly ahead of the bombers and drop fragmentation bombs on the anti-aircraft gun crews, trying to force them to keep their heads down so the bombers can get through.
But as they enter the valley, the sky fills with black bursts of flak. One of the suppression planes is hit directly and instantly vaporized.
Michener's description of the physical toll of this bombing run is incredibly vivid.
As Brubaker follows the CAG into a near-vertical dive, dropping his heavy bombs on the bridge piers, he has to pull out of the dive violently to avoid crashing into the ground.
The immense G-forces crush him into his seat. The blood is sucked from his head. His face sags grotesquely under the weight of gravity.
His mouth gaping wide like an idiot's, his eyes dulling as he fights off unconsciousness. It is pure physical torture.
But they succeed. Through sheer skill and violence, the bridges are dropped, the supply line is cut.
But as they fly out of the valley, Brubaker remembers Admiral Tarrant's words about applying the maximum amount of pressure to the enemy.
He sees a secondary target, a cluster of communist ammunition dumps hidden near the valley exit.
He decides to push it further. He rolls over and dives on the ammo dumps to add that extra degree of damage, and that's when it happens.
This is the moment where the randomness of fate intervenes. Brubaker isn't hit by a massive radar-guided missile. He isn't caught in a wall of heavy flak.
He is hit by a single, solitary communist rifle bullet, no bigger than a man's thumb, fired at random into the sky by an unseen ground defender.
And it perfectly hits Brubaker's Banshee.
We have to look at the mechanics of this impact because it serves as a brilliant, terrifying metaphor for the entire war.
The Banshee is powered by jet turbines. Inside that engine, there is a turbine wheel spinning at an incomprehensible 13,000 revolutions a minute.
It is a pinnacle of modern metallurgy and advanced engineering, perfectly balanced to operate at terrifying speeds.
And what does the bullet do? The tiny, thumb-sized piece of lead blunders into the air intake and strikes the spinning turbine.
It doesn't destroy the engine directly, right?
No, it merely knocks off 2 tiny tips of the turbine blades. Just 2 pieces of metal no larger than a fingernail.
But at 13,000 RPM, losing those 2 tips throws the entire mechanism completely out of balance.
Exactly. The microscopic imbalance creates a violent vibration. The turbine essentially tears itself apart, throwing off dozens of razor-sharp, knife-like blades at supersonic speeds.
These blades slash through the engine casing, ripping into the fuselage, severing hydraulic lines, and shredding the plane from the inside out.
It's incredible. It represents how delicate their highly advanced existence actually is.
Just like the complex American society that built the jet, the machine is so intricate that a trivial disruption of one fundamental part brings the entire structure crashing down.
A random piece of lead fired from a bolt-action rifle brings down a multi-million-dollar technological marvel.
Brubaker issues the Mayday call. His engine is vibrating violently, and he is losing fuel rapidly. He tries to point the nose of the dying jet toward the sea, where he knows Mike Forney and the rescue helicopters can safely pluck him from the water.
But he realizes he's losing altitude too fast. He can't make the coast. He has to crash land on the frozen, muddy landmass of North Korea.
Which brings us to the final act, the final stand, and the unanswered question.
Brubaker executes a masterful, violent crash, landing in a snowy rice field about 3 miles from a communist village. The Banshee's wings are torn off, the jet is destroyed, but Brubaker survives the impact.
He scrambles out of the smoking cockpit, grabs his survival gear, and runs for cover.
And the immediate visceral horror of his situation sets in. He looks around for a place to hide from the advancing enemy troops.
Where does this highly educated lawyer, this pilot who commands the sky, have to hide? In a trench used by the local farmers for storing human sewage before they spread it on the rice fields as fertilizer.
The contrast Michener paints here is agonizing. Just moments ago, Brubaker was a soaring god of the sky. He was untouchable in the silver and blue heavens, moving at the speed of sound, protected by millions of dollars of technology.
Now he is reduced to a hunted, terrified animal, clutching a .38 caliber revolver, shivering in a stinking trench of human waste.
And sitting in that ditch, waiting for the enemy to find him, he realizes something profound about that suffocating gear he's wearing. The poopy suit.
Yes. He takes out his heavy hip knife and physically starts slashing the watertight rubber suit. He destroys it.
He says later, "Ever since I climbed into my first poopy suit, I've been weighed down. Like a zombie. Today, I want to feel like a human being."
He willfully strips away the heavy, suffocating layers of his military role to face his end simply as a man.
Because the rescue attempt goes terribly, tragically wrong, Mike Forney and Nestor Gamage arrive in their helicopter from that miserable scow they were banished to.
They spot Brubaker, but the communist troops were already closing in. Forney decides to land the fragile chopper right in the middle of the rice field under heavy rifle fire.
It's an act of supreme courage, but it's doomed. Nestor Gamage, the quiet, sad-faced Kentuckian who hates the sea but jumped into it to save Brubaker days earlier, steps out of the chopper with his rifle.
He is immediately shot in the chest by communist troops. He falls dead in the freezing mud. A second later, the helicopter's engine block is shattered by bullets, and the machine bursts into flames.
Their escape route is completely destroyed.
Mike Forney abandons the burning chopper and jumps into the stinking ditch with Brubaker. And Mike Forney's character, it's incredible.
Even facing certain death, surrounded by communist troops in a sewage ditch in Asia, his mind is still firmly anchored in Yokosuka.
He turns to Brubaker and says, "You know what kills me right now? Thinking of Kimiko going to bed with that ape from the Essex."
It's dark, tragic humor, but it perfectly encapsulates his unyielding spirit. Forney is motivated by pure fight. He even brought his ridiculous green hat with him, putting it on in the ditch because he wants the enemy to know exactly who they are dealing with.
And when a communist grenade is thrown into the ditch, it explodes, critically wounding Forney. But his body, motivated by sheer, stubborn, driving force, stumbles forward out of the ditch, charging toward the unseen enemy before finally pitching dead into the snow.
Leaving Harry Brubaker completely alone.
And here, Michener delivers what I believe is the most devastating juxtaposition of the entire text. We have the ultimate disconnect between the front line and the home front.
Harry Brubaker, 29 years old, a lawyer, a husband, a father, is bleeding out in a frozen sewage ditch on the other side of the world. He knows with absolute certainty that he will never see Nancy and his little girls again. He is waiting to die.
And at that exact moment,
Michener zooms out. In Brubaker's hometown of Denver, Colorado, 8,000 people are cheering wildly at a university basketball game, completely consumed by the score.
in San Francisco, businessmen are eating expensive dinners and complaining loudly about the vague annoyances of the war without caring to truly comprehend it.
In New York, thousands of people are crowding into warm nightclubs, drinking and dancing.
No one cares. The society he is currently bleeding for is completely oblivious to his sacrifice. They have outsourced their survival and their guilt to him.
And Brubaker's death isn't a glorious Hollywood moment. He doesn't get a long, drawn-out monologue about patriotism. It is brutally sudden.
He is lying in the mud, thinking of his little girls playing in their garden back home. And a hidden communist sniper, who has been patiently waiting for a clear target, fires a single, carefully planned shot directly through the hand Brubaker has covering his face.
He plunges face down into the ditch. Dead. Just like that.
The narrative then sharply cuts back to the carrier Salvo. Admiral Tarrant, isolated in his darkened flag plot, receives the radio report that the rescue failed and Brubaker is dead.
He has lost his surrogate son. The emotional impact on this hardened commander is devastating. He summons the CAG, furious and grieving, demanding to know why Brubaker was abandoned on the ground and why he was even hitting the secondary ammo dumps in the first place.
And this is where the CAG pushes back. The CAG, this stocky fireball who meekly backed down about the airplane engines earlier, completely refuses to take the blame for this death.
The CAG stands his ground. He looks the Admiral in the eye and tells him, "This is a good mission. We did everything just right."
And then he hits Tarrant with the hard, undeniable truth. He says, everybody in the air group knows that you selected Brubaker as your special charge. So today I led your boy to death.
But it was a good mission. And it was your boy who helped destroy the bridges. Admiral, if my eyes are red, it's for that kid. Because he was mine too, and I lost him.
Because he was mine too. It shows the terrible shared burden of command. Every man lost is a piece of their own soul. They both loved him, they both ordered him into danger, and they both have to carry his ghost.
It leaves Tarrant completely alone with his grief, and it sets up his ultimate philosophical query that closes the narrative.
We've explored the terrifying frozen mechanics of carrier flight today. We've looked at the political and psychological burdens of an invisible, forgotten war.
We've seen the icy sea, the suffocating gear, the terrifying randomness of the sky, and the devastating cost paid by a few in a frozen ditch.
This raises an important question. Michener leaves us with an unforgettable image. Admiral Tarrant stands on the freezing deck the next morning in the pre-dawn dark. He watches the next strike launch.
He watches these deadly planes of immortal beauty whip into the air with flame and fury, carrying another batch of young men into the valley. And as he watches them disappear into the clouds, he asks himself, where did we get such men?
Where did we get such men? As you go about your day today, safe in your routine, maybe driving to work or sitting in a coffee shop, consider Admiral Tarrant's question.
Think back to that brightly lit map we talked about at the very beginning, how we desperately want the world to be clean, visible, and binary.
But the reality of survival is murky, complex, and brutally unfair. Are the voluntary men, the Brubakers, the Forneys, the Gamages, are they a product of the society they protect, raised to be brave by their culture?
Or do they exist in spite of a society that has comfortably forgotten them?
How long can a civilization truly endure if it continually outsources its survival to a few reluctant heroes willing to fly alone into the valleys of Toko-Ri? Think about that.